Engaging citizens, a game changer for development? ICT-enabled citizen engagement with Bjorn Soren-Gigler, Senior Governance Specialist, Governance Global Practice, World Bank Group.
In this talk, I'll be covering 4 key issues related to the use of information, communications, technologies, or ICTs, in citizen engagement. Well, let's get started. First, how can the potential of ICTs be translated into real enhancements of people's living conditions and their well-being in the political, economic, and social dimensions of their lives? Second, can ICT enhance accountability and close this so-called feedback loop? Third, what is the unique value? Is there any specific value ICTs bring to the citizen engagement agenda? Lastly, what are some early lessons and recommendations on how to implement ICT-enabled citizen engagement? But first, let us outline what do we actually mean by ICTs. Well, ICTs include both traditional forms of ICTs, such as community and amateur radio, and also more modern uses of communication technologies, such as the internet, mobile phones, social media. You heard a lot about the use of SMS, mobile apps, now crowdsourcing technologies, community mapping, and social computing. Let's turn to the first question: how can the potential of ICTs be translated into real enhancement in people's well-being? To start with this, programs must go beyond the access to technology and instead strengthen the capability of people to actually use ICTs in a meaningful way. This is more important than the sheer and the sole access to ICTs, as this is what makes ICT access actually meaningful. A way to understand this concept further is through the capability approach. The capability approach draws very heavily on Amartya Sen's concept of development as freedom, in which he laid out a clear multidimensional capabilities of well-being, and where he places human development at the center. What matters, according to Sen, is what people are actually capable of being or doing with the goods and services to which they have access to, rather than only the amount of goods they possess. So it's really critical whether ICTs or not can provide people with new options, new opportunities, and capabilities for economic and social development. So now let me come to a key question. How can we actually develop an impact chain on the link between ICTs and people's human development? So the first step is an information needs assessment. So what are in fact the existing information and communications ecologies in each community? So ICTs are not being introduced into communities just completely without a vacuum. No other communication means exist. That's just false. Then second, well, we have to look at the access issue. So who has access and who does not have access? But if we mean access, it also says whether people are entitled to actually use the cell phone, for instance. We found out that in many parts of the world, such as in rural Tanzania or rural Nepal, women do not have the right just to freely access their cell phone, even if the household owns a cell phone. And then last but not least, does this now translate into concrete enhancement into their political, economic, and social rights? So can, for instance, a person now, because they have received that information through the internet, can they have the right to know where to vote? Do they have the opportunity to get better economic development through more priced information? and thus can they basically derive better value out of this information they receive. So now let me address the second question. What is the impact of ICT on accountability, and how can it in fact close the feedback loop between citizens and civil society on one hand, and government and international donors on the other side? So what is now the potential really for social accountability? Like, what can ICT really bring to this important topic of citizen engagement? Well, first, it can really support the two-way flow of information between citizens, civil society organizations on one hand, and government, donors, and service providers on the other. This can lead to more substantive citizen involvement by reducing information asymmetries and can facilitate the recurring interaction throughout the development process, so on a continuous basis. So let me come now to the third question. What is the unique value that ICT can bring to citizen engagement? I think this is really important because since the 90s, we have been talking about citizen engagement, participatory processes. So what would, in a way, a participatory process look like? Participation, if you wish, citizen engagement 2.0. So the first is the approach of radical openness. So technology by itself can in fact foster institutional cultural changes within government, international donors, civil society organization, and the private sector, if these technologies foster and accompanied by a process of political commitment to openness. Second, effectiveness. ICTs can really dramatically lower transaction costs of participation for citizens by making it much cheaper in terms of money and time and breaking barriers of geography for people to effectively engage in civic life. Third, timeliness. Technology can gather real-time data from a broad and diverse set of citizens and civil society groups, which can then empower government officials to make decisions. Before, a lot of the data collected were outdated before they actually reached decision makers already. So this whole idea of almost instant access to data is really completely new and different. Fourth, directness. It can facilitate a direct two-way communications between citizen and policymakers, which can enhance responsiveness to people's real needs. So just imagine regular citizens can in fact send a direct tweet or a direct message to a minister, and the minister can answer this question directly. So this issue of directness without intermediaries is really different. Fifth, inclusiveness. So the power of innovations such as crowdsourcing can enable people who have traditionally been excluded from the development process to have a stronger voice in development. However, technology can also act to exclude the poorest and most marginalized groups. Access is an issue. As we've just seen, literacy is a key issue. So there are many obstacles to making ICT uses much more inclusive. Finally, collaboration. New technologies can break down hierarchies and enable collaboration across different groups and stakeholders, thus promoting horizontal and vertical accountability. Many of the technologies today, like think about open source form platforms, are collaborative by nature. They've been designed for programmers to collaborate, to develop software together, and that we can apply to citizen engagement programs because they can really break silos and lead to a much more collaborative approach. So now I would like to come to the last and final question. So namely, what are some of the lessons learned and recommendations so far of incorporating ICT intocitizen engagement programs? Well, the first and perhaps the most important lesson learned is that technology is not the panacea for development. A major source of failures of ICT-enabled initiatives has been the tendency to position ICTs and technology as a solution in itself. Second, ICT-mediated mechanisms should be designed in response to a clearly defined goal. As Beth Novak mentioned in the second talk, the first step in any ICT-enabled feedback initiative should be to make explicit the purpose of the feedback for a given project, as well as the project's ultimate objective. In light of this, it is crucial to clarify the underlying reasons for collecting citizen feedback, not just citizen feedback for citizen feedback's sake, before really designing the mechanisms and the technology how to engage citizens effectively. So third, the selection of appropriate technology solutions is really critical, and technology has to be context specific. It has to be implemented within the local, social, cultural, political, and economic context. Simply introducing technology into the interface between government and citizens will not lead to meaningful change. Fourth, to ensure the scalability and sustainability of ICT-enabled initiatives, the deployment of ICT tools should follow an iterative and incremental approach. That is, it should identify and build upon best solutions as they're developed and allow for a process of continuous learning and changes of the design. Well, in conclusion, while ICTs are not a panacea for development, under certain conditions, they can in fact be instrumental for both strengthening social accountability mechanisms at the demand side, and second, also promoting institutional changes and behavioral changes, if you wish, within government and donor agencies or on the supply side. So if ICTs are able to enhance people's opportunities, provide them with new options, and expand their capabilities for economic and social development, then they can make a real difference in enhancing people's well-being.